A warm welcome back to A Brummy Wonders. Now, today is a bloody good one. It's all about the priestly riots of 1791, which you may know as the Birmingham Riots, which you may know as the Church and King Riots. Now, there's some spoilers for you, but let's stick with the Birmingham Riots for now. And to compare and contrast 1791, so we're talking nearly 300 years ago. Um, and then we can even compare to 450, 500 years ago in the Civil War, and the fact that the media seem to be the ones who make a big hash of public opinion, and then things always seem to go wrong from there. So let's compare. First of all, a bit of backstory on Birmingham rioting. Now, I'm born in 1992. I was 19 by the time the 2011 Birmingham riots were kicking off. And I'm sure if you're around my age, or maybe a little bit younger, you'll remember all of these riots too. Now, they actually originated in London. Well, we'll get to that. And then it's just how the media managed to spread fear, generally, yeah, and panic across a nation, which then led to lots and lots of looting and burning and violence, which is how these things tend to go by the looks of it. So, no more spoilers. We're going to jump straight into a slideshow, which I've prepared. Now, I did have notes as well, so forgive me if I do look down and read off my phone, but there's a lot of information on this one, and I've tried to get it all down so we don't miss anything. But here we go. First picture. This is where we're heading. This is part of the Priestley riots. That's the Royal Hotel, Dadley's Hotel on Temple Row back in the day. An artist representation at the time of the Birmingham people getting absolutely peed off with what's going on around them. Now, we'll analyse why they thought they were the victims of this particular day. And I think a good place to start is 2011. So my story, a quick one, when the riots kicked off, which I'm sure was August the 8th, 2011. Now, the killing that actually sparked these riots happened in London on August the 4th, and it took a few days to trickle up the country. But generally, must have been around the 8th here, because we were trying to get home from band practice. Me and my bandmates all live in various corners of the Birmingham area. We had to kind of sit back and kind of wait for things to calm down, which had never happened before. Because, yeah, we could see everything in the area basically being blown up, kicked over, smashed. Very, very violent day. So we waited around to await news from our parents because, we didn't have news on our phones at the time, really, at that point. So, yeah, eventually we got the green light to make a move. Just a bit more context here. That mother's studio is here on Ray Street South, which is on the kind of left-hand side of Dugbuff Derrit End as you walk towards town. And as you can see, I mean, this is a recent aerial photo, and everything in the area is basically gone, which is a bit mad. I mean, there's the lovely River Ray there. But all of this gone. Bit more context for you there. There's the River Ray just here. But all of this, there's the Bullring. There's St. Martin's just at the top. All of this is gone. Is that where the old markets were? All of this is gone. There's Park Street and all the history over there, which we'll touch on at some point. But yeah, the whole thing's been ripped off anyway. So maybe these riots at the time were just helping. But here you go, just a quick video for some context. But that's a fire burning on the other side of the kind of Trench Street, Coventry Street, Allison Street, all that side of Dugbuff, I believe. I think that's just a car on fire. But it's really hard to find the, because like we say, like 2011, there actually weren't that many camera phones knocking around. Not good ones anyway. And the phones themselves are probably still in someone's drawer with the files on. But no one was uploading videos at the time. So maybe this is a call to arms for everyone to grab their old phones, grab their old like SD cards, dump them online, just because there's going to be so much cool stuff that we don't know about. Well, that we know about, but don't remember. And then, yeah, it's quite a lot of things that I remember in my mind's eye, which I can find nothing of online, which is a shame. And that's concerning riots that were only 13 years ago. So imagine the stuff that we don't know about riots 300 years ago. But anyway, a bit more memories from me. We left town eventually. We're heading down the A34 towards Perry Bar, Aston, and beyond. And we went past the Barton's Arms. And Saw that, like it looked like it had been peppered with gunfire, to be honest, but most of the windows had been smashed. I've been reading a little bit more into it whilst researching for this. It turned out like a load of hoodlums broke in. There was like 13-year-olds kicking off. Everything was bad. The landlord and that, he had to sort it out himself. Police, I don't know. The police were very busy this day. So, and there's more about that as well, because like all the police forces were being dragged up and down the country because the whole country was kicking off over this eventually. And we will touch on why this riot even started. But this is where the comparisons start, to be honest, because it's all about the news and how maybe we won't call it fake news, but just the wrong information gets circulated, and all of a sudden the people get whipped up into a frenzy. And once that's happening, everyone can just pile in, because once everyone's smashing the city up, what's stopping you from joining them? Because there's simply not enough law enforcement in the area to really make a difference. So you just do what you want, if you want. But that's a moral and ethical issue, isn't it? But anyway, so there's a Barton Arms. It's witnessed a lot, hasn't it? Now, as we went past the Barton Arms towards Aston and all them areas, we're getting to like Perry Bar Shopping Centre. And myself, I saw, I think, three lads carrying an iron bench they just nicked out of a park not far from here. And they were just walking it down the road. And as we got to One Stop itself, game's been put through, Ladbrokes has been put through. Everything's just bad, bad, bad. Excuse me. And yeah, it was just the first time in my life that I'd seen like behaviour like this, to be honest. But it's happened a few more times since, hasn't it, in the country? Not so much in Birmingham, not to this scale. I think this is like the worst it's been since then, to be honest. Because yeah, it hasn't been too bad lately. But I reckon we may be on the cusp of something similar fairly soon. But anyway, moving forward. So yeah, it's how the news gets involved now, and the information. Like this is a now representation of what's on Google, but God knows what it looked like at the time. But it all kind of escalated in a completely separate way over this side, well, in the centre of England. But yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that. So yeah, here's a little synopsis on the Wikipedia page anyway, which just rounds up 6 days of violence, which is a bit of a shame, but actually refers to it as the London riots. Now, this is straight away a clue that, yeah, depending where you're from, actually, news just takes on various forms. So the people in London reckon it's the London riots, but everyone else in their separate cities, because this riot spread around to every bloody city in the UK, essentially. Now, I did have a list that I'd knocked out just to kind of give you an idea. So yeah, I'll get to the point as why it spread, but this riot spread to Birmingham, Manchester, Bristol, Derby, Liverpool, Leicester, Coventry, Nottingham, and others. So it was a big one. It was a civil war for 4 days, wasn't it? So there you go. The 2011 riots were widely known as the London riots, were a series of riots between the 6th and 11th of August 2011. Thousands of people rioted in cities and towns across England, which saw looting, arson, as well as mass deployment of police and the deaths of 5 people. I believe 3 of the dead people were actually Birmingham, which is a shame. But yeah, let's get into why and how the news spread. How the news spread? Via, this was quite novel at the time, really, but like online free messaging had just became a thing. It wasn't free to do this for many people. Like, we were still buying credit and paying 10p to send a text. So like quick fire information wasn't the norm. But BlackBerry, they had a thing called BlackBerry Messenger, BBM they used to call it. And look, they have like a whole QWERTY keyboard at their disposal. And at the time, I'm sure they could send like a broadcast message to many users and big groups. So like, it just seems like people who know the most about the riots today were the people with Blackberries back in the day, which in my experience were the chavvier gangstery kind of people. But that's a separate issue. Now, BBM did drop off as soon as like Android and iPhones, by 2013, they're really the norm. So Android took a dive after that. There's an iPhone user. Now, the last bit of news about BBM service is from this snippet of May 2019. Now, they finally shut it down, but the main overriding memory for this whole system still is that the service was pivotal to the 2011 London rioters shutdown. Now, again, it spread to the whole country, so I don't like this London-centric approach by the news when you Google things, but That's basically the problem across history. So let's just a quick synopsis of why the riots started. Now, I don't want to get all of this wrong, so I am going to read from my notes a little bit. So bear with me. I'm not being rude. I just want to get it right. So this is the incendiary moment of why everything went wrong in England for almost a week. Mark Duggan, pictured there top left. He was shot and killed on August the 4th, 2011, by the police, who believed he was a gang member, drug dealer, and in possession of firearms. Now, his friends and family refuted all these claims at the time. They were surprised to hear that he was in possession of a firearm, because apparently he was a father of three at the time. I think a fourth one popped out later on. Had like minor cannabis offences. They reckon his I'm not even going to go into the ins and outs, but everyone generally in his circle quite sure he wasn't armed, but he was shot. This is the police now. He was shot because he got a gun out, and then there's actually a crazy bit of news that gets released now. So that, skipping forward, so actually, it turns out there's a bullet casing in the radio of a police officer. Now, this was apparently enough to say that Mark Duggan had shot at the police. So this was fine now. It was like absolutely lawful killing by the police because, he was dangerous. But then it turned out that the ISPCC, now this is after all the riots, they actually come back and say, oh, well, the casing in the police officer's radio was actually a police officer's bullet case. So the guy who shot Mark Duggan, it sounds like, it reads like, you can find it online, but the bullet went through his arm. They shot him in the chest and in the back and everything else. But the one that went through his arm completely went through him and then hit another officer, which hit his radio. And so it was police on police violence, you know what I mean? But basically, this guy never pulled a gun by the sounds of it. They found a gun in a sock later on, which we'll have, I do have a shot of this later, but basically they found a gun in this grass over here, saying that he must have lamped it over the fence at some point, so he was armed. Well, then they found no evidence or DNA on the sock or anything, or on the gun of Mark Duggan, but there were, in the original ISPCC report, or the IPCC, can't remember, of 3 police officers witnessing a police officer throw the gun over the wall. So, everything's just all mashed up, and by the time they're actually admitting that they got things wrong, the damage has been done. And there have been attempts to turn over this result twice, I believe. 2014, it was a lawful killing was the verdict in the end for the police. And in 2017, they upheld that when they tried to appeal it. So there you go. It was just a load of mash-up news which no one could really make ends of. But due to the social media state and the state of just the general country at the time, just coming out of a recession, things like that, news spread very fast, and it actually sprouts from, Mark Duggan himself is raised in the area of Broad Farm. Is that what it's called? Broad Farm Riots of 1985, or something similar like that. He came from that area, so grew up in a police and black people tension zone, right? So that's a shot from 1985. Now, Birmingham had their own problems with the Handsworth riots, which we will touch on in another video. But all in, nothing new going on ever. These things just repeat themselves. They repeat themselves. And Mark Duggan would have been aware of that at the time. Obviously, we've had the George Floyd and the BLM thing since then. So these things just keep rolling. I'm not sure where it ends, to be honest, but there's a poor little, is that an Austin? That's a shame. There's a Hillman imp. Right, so here's the result of the local London area, okay? So, as soon as everyone thinks this is a police violence issue, and this was the unlawful killing of a black guy in London, what went up? Hackney, Brixton, Walthamstow, Wandsworth, Peckham, Enfield, Battersea, Croydon, Ealing, Barking, Woolwich, Lewisham, and East Ham all kicked off on what? August the 5th? Yes, straight away. So, London's been smashed to hell. The media starts sending out all that messaging and beaming out these pictures to the country I mean, look at the state of that. I think that was Croydon. I remember the images at the time. They like blazed into my head, got to be honest, and I was fairly young. There you go. It was a full-on warfare kind of situation going on down there. Now, I believe these pictures are from Birmingham. So, why did it get to Birmingham? Similar to the kind of George Floyd situation that happened, 2021, 22? Was it 2020? Bloody hell, it's been a horrible few years, hasn't it? But similar kind of situation where just people, yeah, it's just a riot, it's a protest, isn't it? It's people just getting pissed off at the establishment. But the problem with this one, which is very similar to these old wars, is that the police forces were being taken from Birmingham, Manchester, sent to London because look at the crazy shit that's going on down there. So all of a sudden, there's not enough policing going on, and the other towns start, acting up because the cat's away and the mice will play and all that stuff. So that's Wagwan there. I mean, look, we got £300 million worth of damage just in London. Now, the original kind of approximate, but it was 200 million of damage across the UK. So a lot of stuff got burnt, destroyed, jobs lost, everything's just crazy. So yeah, £300 million, which I believe it was much more because we know that budgeting isn't the strong point of the government or the news or anyone. They just seem to get figures wrong all the time. So yeah, here's the original news put out. Actually, I didn't know I screenshotted this one, but here you go. This is the 6th of August. It's been sent out. It's been preloaded, ready to go at midnight. So it's not like it was a rush to get this story out, clearly. But yeah, the officer was saved as a bullet hit his radio in a gunfight. And it's like, it's not quite blaming the other police guy yet, because a police officer narrowly escaped serious injury when a bullet was found lodged in his radio after an exchange of fire during an attempted arrest. The 29-year-old man, named locally as Mark Duggan, a father of 4, was shot dead by police in the incident in Tottenham in London. Now, it's almost like they don't want to mention the fact that it might not have been Mark Duggan that shot anything. This guy just got shot. They're not saying the police did it. He just had a bullet in his radio. So already they're playing with words. They're tempting the public. They know what they're doing because drama sells. But here you go, another few snippets here. London Evening Standard newspaper quoted Mr. Duggan's girlfriend, Simone Wilson, as saying she was shocked to hear that her boyfriend of 13 years was carrying a gun. She said Mr. Duggan, also known as Starish Mark, had become increasingly paranoid after his cousin was stabbed in a nightclub in March that year. So Jay Crowned, 39, who lives locally, said the man killed in the operation was loved by the community. She said the man had 3 girls and 1 boy and described him as a good daddy. The whole family is devastated. He's not a troublemaker. He's been down since his friend was stabbed in Mile End in around April, March. His friend was like a brother and he lost him brutally. So he was just a bit down. So that's the story there. And then here we go. All of a sudden, this is now, I believe, August the 13th. So this is after the riots have stopped. And this is where the real news starts to come out. That the IPCC says it may have inadvertently misled the media. Not just the media, but the entire country, because these are the results of giving shitey news out. It makes the country kick off. And I believe that was... I don't think they thought it would get as bad as it did, but it got bad, didn't it? So police watchdog investigating the death of Mark Duggan, whose shooting by police sparked the first bout of rioting in London on Saturday, has said it may have inadvertently misled journalists into believing the Tottenham man had fired at police. It seems possible. Yeah, so that's it. So it just didn't happen. Still not major news there. But there you go. This is where this gun was found. Now, I do smell something fishy. Like, why all of this effort to get this story nailed down? And then it gets worse, to be honest, because then the firearms specialist who recommended the bullets to be used in the arrest of Mark Duggan ends up killing himself whilst trying to attempt suicide by police, which is when you basically act up so badly that you try and get the police to kill you. I think the police tased him in the end, and then he shot himself just before New Year of 2017 because he was seeing the ghost of Mark Duggan, which is crazy. So there you go. That's how it all went down. People disappear, and we move on. So, time to compare and contrast there. So let's just remember, most of the country just got burnt down, looted and smashed because of a story that wasn't quite right. That's what happened there. And it's the same for the George Floyd thing that went down in the COVID times, isn't it? It's the same kind of thing. The media has made an absolute mess of it. And in the end, people make their own minds up. And then all of a sudden, you've just got people disagreeing. Now you've got protests. Now you've got anti-protests. And now, blam, civil war could just ignite at any time. And it did. But anyway, so let's get to the point of the Birmingham riots and how these things are quite similar. So I want to start with this book, which I actually found on archives.org. And it's the historical and descriptive sketch of Birmingham with some account of its environs and 44 views of the principal public buildings. Right? Now, we'll have to get my notes out for this bit. Okay, so this is a kind of synopsis of what. And this is a guy looking back at all of this in about 1830 when this is written. But if we look at the causes which stimulated the once peaceable inhabitants of Birmingham, remarked for their industry and obedience to the law, to atrocious and daring acts of violence now to be narrated, we shall discover them in religious and political animosities between the churchmen and dissenters. Dissenters are just these people who don't quite agree with how the church is being ran at the time. So aided not a little by ignorance, for the labouring class of people in this town being brought up from an early age to habits of industry in the various manufactories, to attention which their employments require, together with the necessary relaxations from business, leave little or no time for the improvement of the mind. They are taught to act and not to think. Now, George Carlin pretty much rounds this up, if that's a bit too oldie English for you. Governments don't want a population capable of critical thinking. They want obedient workers, people just smart enough to run the machines and just dumb enough to passively accept their situation. Right? So that's what we're saying. It's just like we just aren't taught to look at the situation and read into things or just calm down and then start again. We are taught to act and just believe what we are told. And nothing's changed. I mean, that's basically the same quote. Which takes us to the priestly riots of 1791, which is Thursday, July 14th. Now, July 14th, you may know, is Bastille Day. We'll get to that. Here's a nice picture of Mr. Joseph Priestley. Now, this stuff is mental, and there's going to be a few episodes of this. I just wanted to make the clear-cut comparison of how these things kick off. And then I'll go into, in another video, all the damage and what actually went on this day of rioting in Birmingham. But he lived on Fair Hill. There's his house at the time. Now, let me just bring up the correct notes. I mean, what did I say here? It's interesting to think that the knowledge and critical thinking techniques of the population at large, especially the working class, is in the hands of those who wish to teach them. Would you teach your loyal subjects everything they need to know, or would you keep them suitably dumbed down to the point where their points of view can be immediately changed with the flick of a television remote or the swipe of a screen? So now, the main reason for this video, I'd like to pull together an easy-to-digest report and analysis of what happened in the Birmingham riots of 1971, what an idiot, 1791, also known as the Priestley riots. So, and I believe that the understanding of this will open the eyes to at least my viewers to the notion that not much has changed at all. I plan on even touching on the Civil War in a separate production, which is nearly 400 years ago. So, Bastille Day, 14th of July, 1688. Now, this is the day, and this all relates. So basically, the French were in a position where the royals and their friends, the aristocracy, and the clergy, which is just basically the fancy people in the church, because they need the church and the king, they keep things going. That's where all the money is. And then the aristocracy are just rich people that the church and king agree with are good people because money, and then allow them to actually become they can run whole areas just based on the fact that they're rich, and they were probably born into that too. And obviously the people of France weren't happy with this. The people of the world aren't kind of happy with this. But this is the old way that things were ran. They call it a feudal system now. And that's just when, old school kind of royalty can just do what they want by the will of God, and the people have no say in it. So they're getting annoyed with that. And like the thing that pushes the French into a position where they can change this is this group of people called the bourgeoisie. Now, these are commoners who have actually managed to get up to this big level like of money and land because industry was going so well at the time with weaponry and just loads of different things now being manufactured, imported, and exported. And suddenly there's rich people that aren't in the aristocracy, and they have enough money to raise their own armies. They've already got the materials and the weapons, and they've got the common people on side because they're probably working for them. So now they've got the biggest majority, really, and like that's how it is now. Like obviously the 1%. That's how people refer to them now, isn't it? It's just like the people who are rich. There's so little of them. How are they in control? Now the French took that very, very seriously and went for it and took over. So they call it Bastille Day. And this is when all those bourgeoisies and even some aristocrats now who are just annoyed with royalty in general and the church, they storm the Bastille. And then, King Louis the 16th at the time, he takes a step back. And, Parliament's introduced essentially, or at least a constitution. So the king can't just do what he wants. It has to be agreed upon and at least within the guidelines of these general rules that the French people will put in place. I hope that made sense. A visual representation of the French Civil War. Now, it's not the revolution, it's the start of the revolution. This carried on for a few years, but this was fairly fresh. 1688, so only like 3 years before this fancy priestly riot in Birmingham. So there's a little picture of the aristocracy and a little information bit there saying for centuries the most common type of government. Aristocracy as a system of political power all but vanished after World War One. Now, just as a quick bit of an information nugget for you, just to bring this locally, but Thomas Holt was part of the aristocracy, the guy who owned Aston Hall, the guy, there's another photo of the lovely place, but he's actually the namesake of the Holt End at the Aston Villa football ground. The Aston Villa football ground actually on Holt's estate, which used to be Aston Lower Grounds, which we've been in before. If you go back in the channel, you'll learn more about that. But Thomas Holt was just a rich guy. So the king was his friend, and then in the Civil War, the king's the kind of guy who's going to like swing by and say, hey, you're basically the justice of peace for Birmingham. You tell them, because this is, we're going too far into the other war now, but generally, the king is going to tell people like Thomas Holt and probably pay him off a little bit more and just make things nice for him. But you are in control of Birmingham. Now go and convince them that my royal army can just turn up in Birmingham, because the Birmingham are parliamentary at the time, and just take over peacefully. And obviously that didn't go too well, but we'll get into that later. But that's what we're saying, like these big estates around Birmingham, some of them are royal supporters. But like, just remember the name aristocracy. They're the people who are part of the power purely because of money. Okay. So back to Priestley. And on the 7th of July, so a week before the Bastille Day anniversary, he sent out an invitation to 80 plus people, friends. I'm sure some were aristocracy, but generally rich people, business owners in the area. Birmingham's quite known for not being too royalist at the time. They're doing their own thing. Industry and taxes are slightly different here. Guilds are slightly different here. Everything's just a bit better in Birmingham. It's a bit more liberal at the time. You can do what you want. There is an irony to all of this, which I'm sure I've got a screenshot of, which we can bring up in a minute. But so this fancy dinner to dine at the hotel on Thursday, July 14th, 1791. Which hotel was it? Well, it was Dadley's Hotel, also known as the Royal Hotel on Temple Row in Birmingham. It's no longer there now, but it is. I think it was here. It might have been here. But that's Temple Row at the back. Obviously, St. Philip's there. Colmore Row here. Cherry Street there. So it's here somewhere anyway. It's gone now. Just for more reference again, there you go. It's a lovely little place, but apparently very basic. But had lovely assembly rooms and all that. Apparently Queen Victoria's been there and everything. Wowee. So there you go. Now, at this dinner, which Priestley didn't attend, he was warned against it, and we'll get to why in a minute. But all these fancy people lead in there. They're toasting away because this is to celebrate Bastille Day anniversary, of course. So there was a few toasts that were being made, and actually, oh, I should do that in a minute. Ugh. What order should I do this in? But these are the toasts, actually. Let's do this first. So, to the majesty of the people, these are things that I happen to agree with. I'm not sure if that's right to say, but I've been trying to figure out if I agree with Priestley and all of these people who are celebrating the French Revolution that's starting. And yes, so the majesty of the people, may the Constitution of France be rendered perfect and perpetual. May Great Britain, Ireland, and France unite in perpetual friendship, and may their only rivalship be in the extension of peace, liberty, wisdom, and virtue. These are all good things, isn't it? It's like people thinking for themselves, not being trodden down and just being told what to do, having a bit more say in how their lives work. So yeah, the rights of man. May all nations have the wisdom to understand and courage to assert and defend them. Now, yeah, education, making people aware of their rights, that still wasn't happening in the schools. It still isn't really happening now. But because if you educate people too much, they might do an uprising, which you don't want, do you? So even here, I mean, like, here's some propagandist drawing where Priestley's actually attending the dinner, which is kind of mental. But he wasn't there. But the people of Birmingham thought Priestley was there. They don't agree with Priestley because, I mean, have I got... Here you go. So yeah, what actually happened was Priestley's writings got pulled out of context. Now, Priestley was a kind of scientist, a free thinker, a liberalist, or whatever. But he actually, I mean, he even discovered oxygen. He isolated that, discovered oxygen. He invented carbonated water, things like that. And then, so in some of his papers, and because of his free thinking, he did send out a bit of a silly paragraph, which whipped everyone up into a frenzy. So this is what he wrote. We are, as it were, laying gunpowder grain by grain under the old building of error and superstition. Now, he's just talking about the old ways, which is a single spark may hereafter inflame, so as to produce an instantaneous explosion, in consequence of which that edifice, the erection of which has been the work of ages, may be overturned in a moment, and so effectually that the same foundation can never be built on again. So this guy, it's a big allegory for the the crumbling of the old system is all he's saying. And like every grain of gunpowder, that is just every person who's being enlightened and opening their minds, and all of these people with their open minds can suddenly create an explosion, figuratively speaking. But of course, he's gone down the gunpowder route. Apparently, he was warned against this. He got called Gunpowder Joe, and there's a picture of that because of this. But here's the irony of it all, though. So obviously, the people of Birmingham at this point, they're thinking, "Oh, he's literally going to blow everything up. We hate him." I guess is that how they're thinking? I guess so. But here's the rioters were traditional Birmingham working men whose cry was church and king. Ironically, people of a similar class to those who were instrumental in the overthrowing of the established order in France. So, however, it is certain that they were provoked to riot by influence of members of the Anglican and Royalist establishment in the town who feared for themselves and the way of life should an English revolution ever take place. At that time, it was by no means uncertain. So, yeah, everyone's just controlling public opinion, which is how it has always been. So yeah, after the dinner, everyone's kicking off. They're all of a sudden the most royal town in the world, even though Birmingham is a known parliamentary town. But by then, they're very much church and king and preserve our history, all this stuff, which is just mental. So yeah, they ended up busting his house up, as you can see there. This is just like a quick drawing, I think. But they did get to his house in the end and smash it up, along with many, many other buildings throughout Birmingham, which will take me to my next video. And I'll run you through everything they did, where they went, how they got there, and how it all ended and how it came to a stop, which is basically, I mean, I can say it now. It comes to an end when the army get introduced, and suddenly the rule of man is, I mean, martial law can basically come in at that point. You have to go home or you will be killed. That's kind of it. And these things have happened throughout history in plenty of places, and they'll continue to happen. It almost happened with the Birmingham Riots. I'm sure you remember, but there was lots of conversation going on online, and not online, but on the news and in the media, about at what time do you introduce Tanks to the game? When do you bring rubber bullets at least and weaponry and ballistics? When can you use them? And the second that became kind of tomorrow's plan, it really dissipated quickly. I mean, helped along by the deaths of people and things getting out of hand, and then the media ran with that a little bit and kind of pushed social cohesion off the back of it. But Christ, it was an absolute mess, and this hasn't turned into the slick and easy presentation that I wanted it to, because I've got far too many points of view on the whole thing. But I hope you understand the general message so far, which is you can send, a town's people, a country's people into absolute crazy, crazy times just by what you tell them or what you make them believe. Not like you don't let them think for themselves, and all of a sudden things get stupid very quickly. And the only way of stopping it is bringing the army in. So you always keep those. You keep that card in your pocket, just telling the people, you will be stopped. And like before all of that, maybe a magistrate reading out an act and hammering it to a wall would be enough to stop the people, but it's just not enough anymore. And the real question is, whose side are the army on? If they are going to take out the people, are they your army or are they your enemy? But that's another conversation, eh? Thank you very much for joining me. I've been a Brummy Wonders. I hope that made some kind of sense and you enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one where we will tackle exactly what went down in the Birmingham Riots. Now, ta-ta.